All right, this is a AB763 Super Reverb from I think 1964 or 1965. And my friend dropped this off. He says, "Ryan, have fun with it. I have another Super Reverb and I want this one to be modded." He said that there was some noise coming from it and it turned out to be a bum speaker. So and you'll notice that there's a little bit of a gap here and this thing smells like firewood. So interestingly, he just was like, "You know what? Have fun with it." He ordered a new replacement baffle. We're going to put new speakers in it, and this thing's going to be tricked out in a. It's going to keep the same circuit, but we're going to change out some components, do a recap, and add a trem disconnect switch. So this thing is going to be, Stevie friendly for those types of tones. Here's some footage of the back of the amp. You can see, pretty much all original. Kind of I'm gonna have to go ahead and change that out. But we have, sort of your standard setup here. Some improvements. Looks like this thing was kind of mangled, so I'll try to fix that or replace it. What's cool about this amp, and here's the speakers. This is the one that's the cone is busted on it, and because we're having fun, we're gonna keep this front baffle and we're gonna keep the front speaker. But we got a new baffle in again from Mojo Tone. I picked up. Whoops. I picked up some Gavit wire here. So it's gonna look and feel a lot original. Here's a little sticker. It's awesome. And here comes with the amp, or came with the amp, all the original capacitors and things. So this is really cool when you have this to go along with your amp. Here are all the components that we're going to use today. These are all resistors, 2-watt metal oxide resistors. I got all this stuff from not Mojo Tone, but CE Distribution and or Amplified Parts. So if you're an amp builder / fixer, you want to open an account with CE Distribution for a slight discount. This is not sponsored by them, by the way. And if you're just looking to buy the casual parts here and there, as a consumer, you go through Amplified Parts. But anyway, so I have these 2-watt resistors. Those will be for the voltage drop, voltage divider resistors. Capacitors are all F&T, except for this one, which is Sprag. And I'm going to use, just to kind of look like the original here, those doubled up capacitors. See those huge Mallories? Or they're somewhere in there. The 25 UF by 25 UF. There's basically two capacitors inside here. So it'll look like the original circuit. So that's sort of what I'm going for. These are 1 watt. Were they 1 watt or are they 2 watt? 1 watt ohmite 100K. So I'm going to use these for plate load resistors. They're really big. And this is going to stop that spitting and sputtering, or at least some of it, that plate load resistor spit and sputter. And again, more F&T, so we're going to go F&T across the board. I love the way they look. They perform great, pretty reliable. And let's talk about tubes. For tubes, my buddy really has a great taste in tubes. Here are some of the NOS ones that we are going to put in. Now, if you know me at all, I'm not too crazy about NOS stuff. This is going to be an interesting sort of lesson that I can have firsthand experience with. Maybe there's something cool to it, maybe not. Maybe there's some reliability things that will be beneficial, maybe not. But again, we're gonna find out, and I will leave an honest reaction. All right, here we go. We're on the inside here. Looks like it was not so much modified, but definitely, looked after. I don't know how long, so that's kind of the question is, my friend said that there was really not too much information about, or at least I think he said there wasn't too much information about when this was last serviced. So it does look like they changed out the phase inverter 0.1 UF caps here. I've seen that as kind of like preventative maintenance. So I'm going to check and see if there's any way I can check for, and usually that's for passing DC, if there's any way to check that. It looks like the board, I don't know if this is very common or if this is an indication that, this was kind of warped in a way through moisture in the years. But, that's something interesting. It may not be too bad. I'll check the board for resistance. After a while, if these boards are subjected to moisture, they become conductive, which will make nasty hums and things because basically there's supposed to be no resist, or it's supposed to be infinity resistance between each of these pads. But if you start getting conductivity, now this can be connected to this, and then you got weird like feedback things going on. So that's going there. I have an orange drop in my hand, and this is a polyester orange drop, very much like the ones that would have been installed in the 60s. So if I'm not too comfortable, with these, I might just swap them out just for tone. I'm sure that the ones that are in here are fine, but orange drop is an orange drop, and they use them in Fender, so I want to kind of stick with that sort of style. There's a few other capacitors here that look like they were changed out. I don't know if that was a preventative thing or what, but I'll look into that. This is interesting. I looked over here. There's a ground wire, and it is not attached. So I know that these things aren't grounded normally, and it does look like this outlet is still active. So what I think I'm going to do is just deactivate this outlet, and then maybe I'll have some fun with that ground switch and maybe make it into a master switch, which I've a post preamp sort of master volume. That's what I'm thinking at this point. That would be like the major change I do. And then for the intensity, I'm going to have that trem disconnect pot. They look like this. So basically when you turn the pot all the way down, you're disconnecting the trem entirely, which they say is a Cesar Diaz sort of trick that he did with Stevie Ray Vaughan. I'm not quite sure if that was reality or what, because, inside of Stevie's vibro reverbs and the super reverbs, I don't think have been, publicly posted, but, that's kind of the folklore here. I'm going to change out all the electrolytics again, just to make this thing kind of up to date, and I'll write the date on when it was serviced. See here, 64. I'm going to guess that this is a 64. All right, let's get going. All right, first up, I'm going to unsolder this chip here. Not chip, it's a capacitor. I did check the outer foil on these orange drops already, and I know that it needs to point this way. Next up is replacing these phase inverters. So the good thing about this amp is it actually came with the original capacitors, and I'm doing a test here because normally you change out these film caps if they're passing DC, and I have an ESR meter, and I'm not quite sure if this is the best way to test for passing DC, but I know ESR is a factor. And here I have a brand new orange drop comparing to this Astron molded here. Wait, no, sorry, I don't think it's Astron, whatever it is. And the blue one, and they get the same reading. Actually, this one was like 15.6, and it did measure on my capacitance meter, 100 nanofarad on the dot. So I'm going to reinstall these, and if I hear anything bad, then I will swap it out. But I'm going to reinstall these. I'm going to leave this capacitor here for the trem circuit, but I am going to remove this capacitor here. It is technically a polyester and meets all that criteria, but we're going to go orange drop. All right, the last capacitor is this one that we're going to focus on. All right, so I'm measuring the plate load resistors, and they are measuring a lot low. Well, not like a lot low. At least they're all consistent. But I'm getting 96, which I guess isn't too bad. Again, these are 100Ks. But, you know, I want to make this thing as quiet as possible, so I am going to replace them. And I hope the purists out there aren't mad at me. But I did get free reign to have fun with this amp, make it quiet and reliable is the directive here. So quiet using these, and reliable by changing out the capacitors, the electrolytics, and then we'll get going. All right, forgot to take a video, but I have the new F&T caps installed in the doghouse. And then also, we replaced the resistors, the voltage drop resistors with metal oxide. I believe these are 2 and also 3 watts. All right, got the plate load resistors. Again, they were starting to drift low. And I have the orange drops in and the phase inverter capacitors. I did check. This does look like it was serviced recently. And the way that I know that is these mod capacitors have not been out for a while. And I went ahead and used my ESR tester on these Sprague Atoms, and I'm just going to leave them in. There's no sense, and plus the tech who did the job really did a nice job. And I'm just going to leave them in. I don't think there's anything more to do there. So I'm going to move on and then start with the trem pot change. All right, I have this trem disconnect switch. So what I do here is I jumped the basically the ground over to the base, which is grounded. I guess I could have grounded right to the chassis, but I don't know. I didn't. And this was a good continuity, so that was fine. Basically, it's achieving the same thing. And I intercepted the wires going here, so you have the yellow wire, and then this trem disconnect. So when I go all the way to the left, or to turn it off, you'll hear it might be already off. You'll hear a click when I go all the way off, and that basically disconnects the trem from being in the circuit, which this 50K pot loads down the signal. And what you're going to notice, you're going to get a lot better feel, or a lot bigger feel, when you disengage the trem. So if you're not using the trem at all, or if you want it to be exactly, like the circuit was, just turn the trem all the way down. Just don't go that extra click. And it's the exact same thing. That's my multimeter beeping over here. And then once I do engage the trem, I gotta clean that up. Basically, that does establish the connection from here to here, and that enables the trem. So you have the best of both worlds using this brand new reverse 50K pot. All right, next up, because it's bothering me, I'm gonna fix this ground. It is supposed to have, according to code, its own ground lug, like not touching anything else. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm actually going to disconnect this screw here, and I'm going to replace that screw with this, and then I will ground it directly to that tube socket. Make sure that underneath that metal chassis is kind of scraped away, so it's making a good connectivity to the chassis. And then that's a clean way that I'm going to do that. All right, I have that installed. You can see that I shortened the wire too to be as logistically short as I can. And that's on a lock washer, and we're good. I like to use the nylock nuts because I feel like they're vibration proof. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to test. So I got one probe lead on the ground here, and I'm going to touch the other to the chassis. And you can hear my multimeter tell me that there is direct continuity between that ground plug and that chassis ground. Next thing I am going to do is I'm going to actually remove this ground switch and turn it into a master volume. Some people have problems with these being a 2-prong receptacle outlet instead of 3. I'm just going to leave it as is, but what I am going to do is I'm going to wire this switch. Basically, the black underneath is going to go directly to the receptacle, and we're going to eliminate this switch altogether, and then go from there. First thing I'm going to do is unsolder all the connections. While I'm in here, I'm going to replace these. They kind of look a little warm for sure over the years, and I have these Ohmite 5-watt versions of them wire wound. I think it's 1% tolerance, but you could tell it's a lot beefier. If these fail because of a power tube failure, it could be pretty bad for your amp. So I'm just going to go ahead and replace them with these 5-watt versions. All right, got the new resistors soldered in. Kind of moved over the heater wire here. And now, since I have basically, I did that right now because they were sort of in the way with all the wires. So I want to have easy access to the back here. So I'm going through the electrical outlet and the wiring that the prior tech did, and I believe that they are backwards because the larger opening is this one, and the smaller opening is this one. And if we look at some various resources online, you can see that the black should actually go to the smaller receptacle outlet on this 2-prong, and the white should go to the bigger, so that one, and then so on. So I'm going to clean that up. All right, so now I believe I have this correct. We have the black, which is hot, coming up to the smaller receptacle, and then we have the white, which is the neutral, going here. I should really, I guess if this was a new build, go with a double pull, double throw, so we could disconnect the transformer altogether. But in this case, we're going to leave it sort of as it was, and we're going to have the black coming in here, which is, again, the hot, going to the fuse first. There's some debate on whether you should go to the switch first or you should go to the fuse first, depending on UL coding and things like that. So, definitely do your own research, and whatever is the best fit, whatever you like. I do need to clean up this solder joint right here on that fuse, so I'm going to do that off camera. And after it goes through that fuse, it's going to come over here to the standby and then run directly to the power transformer. So you might have noticed here is my push-pull switch that I'm going to see if a train wreck style master volume is a good fit for this amp. And if not, I'll just remove it. All right, I think this is going to be my final trick, but I'm going to try to do the Rob Robinette documented Vox cut control. So I believe if the pot is pushed in, we're going to do a late circuit, just power to Vox-style cut control. So you can really crank the preamp and get rid of that high pitch or that high ice pick tones. And if you pull out, I believe that will give you the master volume. So you kind of get the best of both worlds using this, and you can test it out. The hope is there is no noise. So I'm going to use some coax I'm going to ground at this end, and then just run the wires, of course, to the push-pull pot switch. This is just a standard push-pull 250K that you would find for Strat wiring. I have this little brass collar that's going to go over this, so I can attach a set screw. Or I can just add a gnarled knob to it. Let's go. All right, have the push-pull push-in is cut. So it will cut, in theory, and then pull. You got your master volume, Type 3, train wreck style. Here's my coax that I have. And then I used a solid core wire here to make a stiff coax shield right to the ground over here. So follow the coax up, kind of have it tucked and out of the way, going to the switch. It's kind of hard to see all the different switch things, but the main important thing is that you want to work from the bottom up. As you can tell, I'm basically sitting on top of the heater wire. So, yeah, I hope that there's no heater wire hum coming through this pot, but I don't know. We're going to have to try it and test it out. If it is noisy, I'll just remove this, and that will be that, because I really don't want to drill up into here or run wires. Some people put it all the way back here, and I don't really want to kind of do that to this beautiful chassis. As you can tell, there's like almost no rust. Looks pretty well taken care of throughout the years. I chose this metal aluminum knob. It seems to fit really nice. I was a little skeptical at first because I put the brass collar on, because this is a solid shaft knob, but it actually stays on there really well with that collar sleeve. So next thing to do is I'm going to double check all my work and turn it on. Oh, one last thing is I'm going to make him and you can buy these online. Basically, you short out this trem pedal jack, and then that kicks on the trem. I'm going to take and actually make this kind of short, so you don't need the full foot pedal in order to kick on the trem, which is, I think, pretty cool, pretty neat, especially with the trem disconnect switch. You're able to turn that off entirely. So as long as there's no parasitic noise from that oscillation going on, we should be pretty good. It'd be kind of a neat experiment, at least. So I'm going to just solder. You can see I push the wire always all the way through. I was going to very carefully solder it. Actually, I don't know. I'll watch a quick video on how to solder these, but I'm just going to solder it through that little hole and then attach the outside directly to the outside of this pedal, or this little jack, which will ground it. All right. That's what it looks like. I like to leave just a little bit extra. Kind of shows what's going on, and plus you can kind of feel back there. I don't recommend pulling on this, but you could, I guess, if you wanted to. Just a quick thing to try. Not going to show off a sound demo just yet, but I did plug this in and everything works. So next up is going to be removing this panel so I can get access to these screws. I have a super long screwdriver that I bought from Harbor Freight. This thing's like 1.5 feet long. So I can actually, the shaft comes out and the handle comes out to about here. I'm going to lay this amp on basically down, so the speakers are facing to the floor, and then that way I'm able to unscrew that baffle, because you can tell there's a gap towards the top here. I think when someone recovered it, I think things got a little wonky. That's why it sticks out on the front. All right, so now I have the cabinet in the garage next to my car. Hello, car. But anyway, I have some scrap here. This is from speakers cutouts, and I'm going to basically support just the front of the baffle, maybe down here or up here, I don't know. But the main thing is I'm going to try to catch this edge right here. You can see where it kind of pokes in to take the pressure off. Now when I install the new baffle, I'm going to do the same thing. And the reason for this is that it puts all the pressure on the front baffle here. And basically what I think happened is that whoever installed this panel last time, you can see that there's there's a sort of a gap here, but then you get towards the top and it's kind of falling out and up. My guess is that's probably either really stripped or they didn't put basically the pressure on the baffle, and they put basically it face down and was trying to work with gravity and pull that baffle up when really, to get against the little cleat on the inside. So I'm going to lay that down afterwards. But here we go. And here's my super long screwdriver that I got from Harbor Freight. I'm normally not a Harbor Freight kind of guy, but it'll do the job here. But you can see that screwdriver, now I can get very close to vertical, taking these screws out and putting them back in. So hopefully it makes a little bit better experience versus having, the screwdriver handle hit here, and then you can see obviously the angle would be a lot worse, where I'd have to kind of come into this baffle at an angle versus coming straight out. So that's my plan. So I'm going to unscrew this, take out these original speakers, and install the new baffle, and see if I need to reclaim some of these screws, or if I can, or if the new baffle came with screws. Got the new baffle installed. Really happy with this Mojo Tone baffle. This thing is solid. I didn't have to drill it or anything. But as you can tell, the lighting kind of sucks in here. But you can see that there is now an even space all the way down, as there should be. This thing looks so much better. Looks like some of the grill cloth is coming down here, probably just from it being cut in a weird spot, but I can clean that up. You can see definitely on this side, you can see that there's, it's about a 1/4 inch gap all the way up. And this is just a little bit of fraying, so I'm gonna have to cut that very carefully. But this thing is sweet. Mojo Tone was able to accommodate and make this a aged grill cloth too, because if this thing's vintage, don't want it looking too brand new, might be confused with a reissue. We want to make sure everyone knows that this is vintage. All right, here's some of the new speakers. Got 2 boxes here from Ted Weber. All right, let's go unbox these things and install them in the baffle. While I'm in here, I'm checking out the reverb pan, and this must have been standard. I think this looks standard. I'm not sure. I'm not really great. I probably could look it up. But I think the springs are a little, at least the ones holding that in place, seem to be really, really, really bouncy. And I know that those springs fatigue over time. Here's a brand new mod pan, and you see that I don't know what you call this, but the main plate here is held in place pretty tight, and it's these springs that do all the springing. Now the splash, I hear it, but then it quickly dissipates. This one, you can hear the springs kind of decay for a long time. I'm not saying that's bad, but I did notice that this reverb tank sounds really, really bright. At least it still works. I'm gonna just leave it for now. Maybe I'll do a test with this afterwards, but I needed to take this apart because the second thing I want to talk about is, here are the new speakers. Here's the speakers coming in. All Ted Weber. This is what the customer chose. Very cool, very cool. And so I just want to talk about how to tighten these down, because I think there's not really too many people that pay attention to how to tighten these down. If you go, basically the idea is that you go kind of like the star thing. You start one corner, and all, by the way, these are all just hand tightened right down to the bottom. 1, 2, 3, 4, kind of like a star pattern, like on your cars. So yeah, do that, and then go around just a quarter at a time. You're not supposed to go too much more than just hand tighten on these things. So I recommend just getting, or at least with this, I'm gonna take the socket and then just hold the socket, and then just by hand go a quarter in the star pattern, a quarter, and maybe an eighth of an inch. Right there, right there, right there. All the way around for each of them. And that's how we're going to do it. And then after that, we'll be soldering up. So like I was saying, it's all brought down. Here we go, just a quarter. Quarter of a turn. Quarter of a turn. Quarter of a turn. And then I'm just going to go like maybe an eighth. 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 The idea is that you want the basket to not warp. That's the biggest thing. And you see, like, there's usually like a cork kind of outside thing. I forgot what that's called at the moment. But you don't want that to compress or warp. You see that there's basically on this baffle, there's only 4 instead of having like the 8. So that's what you do. And you're not supposed to go too much more than just hand tighten. And I see a lot of folks online just kind of cranking these down, or I ask, you know, when they reach out to me and like, hey, this speaker's kind of, did I get a busted one on arrival? Well, it's probably okay, but the fact is you warp the basket, which these speakers go in and out in a super tight tolerance, kind of in and out there. So if you warp the basket, you could have the speaker rub as it's going in and out of the magnetic chamber. Gonna tighten these all up and start soldering away. In the home stretch now, I got this jack. I like these little pancake jacks. It's kind of reminiscent of the ones on the original Fenders. I could buy the original Fenders, but they were at a different supplier, and I don't think they matter that much. I got some of that vintage cloth, the white and the black, so it will match at least some of the aesthetics of the original. What I don't have is that center tap here, but that's all right because Fender also did a for basically the out of the jack will be 2 ohms. Each of these will be a pair here, which will bring it down to 4 ohms, and then in parallel, of course. So 8 and 8 is 4, 8 and 8 is 4, and then 4 and 4 will be 2 at the end. So that's how I'm doing it. I'm going to do a light twist and see how it goes. One tip, especially when you have brand new speakers, when you're soldering speakers, always, always, always attach a cloth or something protecting the speaker below it. And if you're laying these speakers down on its face, make sure you put that cloth below, because a hot glob of solder can poke a hole through these paper cones, and guess what? That will destroy them and really limit the lifespan of those brand new speakers. So again, put a cloth down. Do it. All right, here we go. Here's how the wiring came out. I just have to do the jack, but I'm pretty happy how this came. I think the loops make a lot of sense. Maybe I'll just tighten these up. I'm a pretty big fan of making sure that there's not too much slack, but also there's enough slack. I think this looks pretty much vintage. Using the right cloth wire, kind of braiding technique, wiring. I like it. All right, using this little sucker holder vise thing I got from Stompbox Parts. Or actually, you know what? I got that from amplifiedparts.com. But anyway, this is how I'm going to attach here. I have heat shrink to act like a pseudo strain relief. It's not really going to be a strain relief, but you know, hopefully we'll minimize any sort of flex. But I don't think it's going to do much, just being honest here. But that's how I soldered things together. Again, using my favorite solder. This, you know, obviously has got to be pretty tight because that back plate is going to fit on top. But there I go. Last thing you want to do is, before you plug this thing in for the first time, you want to make sure you're not shorting out that jack or anything, because you will blow up that output transformer. So right now I have my positive and negative lead on my my multimeter here, and I'm getting 2.4 ohms, which is good because I wired this, and all 8 ohm speakers should come out to 4 ohms when they're all in parallel. So I think this one's good. All right, here's a sort of tone demo-ish. I'm not the best player in the world. I think you can sort of gather that. But you can talk through the controls here. Right now I have the amp on. And there's just a subtle hiss, not much more. Check this out. Of course it's going to get louder. But it sounds really pretty quiet. That's what sort of we're going for, right? The reverb, again, it's really splashy. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, if I should maybe swap out that reverb tank with one that's less splashy like that, or reactive to like little subtle jolts. I have the trem switch. Actually, right now it's off, so that extra levels. We'll see what happens when I turn the switch. Watch this. A lot quieter hiss. And what that does, oh, I gotta plug it in. And I can turn it off. Whoop, turn it all the way up. We're gonna turn it off. And hear how louder that is? And that hum is because of the guitar and the proximity. But let me get away and strum through. And remember that knob in the back, so I'm going to slowly, actually that was all the way up, and now if I roll that knob for the tone, that top end at the very end is rolled off. But so I like to play around with the treble and that post, or that power section tone control. So I think that's a little too dark, but what I'm going to do is turn that treble back up, maybe halfway in the back, and have the treble at 6, so it's going to take away just that little ice picky. Just playing around, so you can sort of get the tones. Obviously everything still works, so you can, if you really wanted to, you can turn that bright switch on and play with that, with the tone switch in the, or tone knob in the back. turn that off. Now there's too much bass almost, and it's breaking up. Well, it's got all the tones in there, I promise. So I'm going to check the bias afterwards, and I think I'm going to call this one good, and the customer will come pick it up. Appreciate you guys watching. Stay tuned for more, and leave a comments below. And I will leave you with this.